So, any questions before we proceed?
No, sir.
Okay. I mean, are you getting time to practice or?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So here, okay. So what is a loop? What is a loop in the normal programming languages? Or maybe iterative statement. We generally call it as iterative statement or loop statement, right? So iterative or when you say iterative, it says that you want to iterate something, right? You want to execute it repeatedly until some certain condition is matched or unmatched, isn't it? So there are totally three types of loops which are provided in the PLSQL. Mostly in the other languages also we have the same thing. Maybe if you consider C or Java, we have the same concept. We have the three loops. We call it as basic loop, for loop, and while loop. So generally, as a developer, whenever you get a requirement to write some code to perform some iterative action, you may come across a question, which loop is better, right? So again, it depends upon your scenario, but mostly try to prefer for loop. That's the easiest thing, okay? Or else if you cannot achieve something using for loop, then you have to go with a basic loop or maybe other loop, okay? Let's see the syntax of each and every loop, and also we'll see some samples in the same area, okay? So the basic loop syntax here is the blue color highlighted one is the keyword. Okay. So you understand, right? What do you mean by keyword?
Yes, sir.
What is that?
Keyword
Yeah.
standard.
Yeah. So keyword is something which is Oracle provided word. Okay. Which will have its own functionality. So as a developer, we should never use those keywords for our variables or maybe our our variable purpose. Now if you see loop, we should not declare a variable called loop, okay? Because this is a standard keyword which is having its specific meaning, okay?
Yeah.
So that is what a keyword means. Now coming to here, the syntax is like you have a loop and then end loop. So inside loop and end loop, we can write our business logic. Okay. When I say business logic, it can be your SQL code or PLSQL code. And then this red color highlighted, this is mandatory here because, like if you just have a loop and end loop without having any end condition, without having any exit condition, this loop will get executed infinitely, right? If you don't mention exit condition, it will execute infinitely. That's the reason whenever you're using loop and end loop, always you have to have a exit condition. Okay. So let's see one example here. So if you see, observe this example here, what are we doing is, in the declared section, we declared one variable called number, okay, and the initial value is 1. And here, as per the code, what we have written is, we're just printing the value initially, and after that, we are incrementing it. And the exit condition, what we mentioned here is, exit the loop whenever this meets the criteria counter greater than 5. So once it reaches counter greater than 5, nothing but once it reaches 6, then it will come out of the loop. Until it doesn't meet the 6, it will always perform the loop, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So let's see that. So I'll write another example, okay? So I'll write another example considering the same scenario. Basic loop. Okay. Now, okay. So can you tell me what is the output of this? Do you see this function? I mean, did you ever come across this function? Substr?
No, sir.
Okay, no problem. See, substr is nothing but it's a string function. First of all, it's a string manipulation function. This retrieves a portion of a string. Now, the input string is Smith, and here what I'm mentioning is I mentioned the position, I mentioned the length, right? So it is printing S, right? Let us say if I mention 3 here, what it will print from the starting position, get me 3 letters, SMI. Try this. Got it? Now let us say I want to get the information from the fourth string, from fourth position. From fourth position, I want 3 strings. So nothing but after, like it will start from T. TH, it has to print TH.
Yes.
Got it? So this is called substring.
Yes.
Okay. So now what we want to do is we want to write our requirement is use a basic loop. First of all, use basic loop and print each character, print each character, okay, of a name, print each character of a name one by one until all characters are printed. So the functionality is, let us say you consider employee name, and as per this particular loop, we want to achieve that. We want to print one by one character. Okay. So first of all, like in a computer sense, whenever you are doing any program, always don't worry about the coding style, don't worry about the syntax. You have to think of a logic. If you know the logic perfectly, you can implement any program. First of all, always you have to worry about logic, not about the syntax or coding. Okay. Now in our case, declare begin as n. This is what I'll declare. Now what is the requirement? So we have to have first of all a string, right? So I'll declare v underscore name as varchar2 15. Okay. So I'll say Oracle ERB is my input string. Okay. Now as per the requirement, what we want to do, we want to get the length of the string and iterate the loop. So I require length also. V underscore length number, and initially this is what we require. Let's try. Or we may require one temporary character also. V underscore temp name is equal to varchar2. I'll just declare it as 1. Okay. Now what we require, first of all, we have to get the length, right? V underscore length is equal to length of V underscore name. Correct? It will get the length. It will have the length now. Now what we want to do, why it is giving red color here? Syntax error. Okay, yeah. V underscore length is called length of name. So it will have a length. Now we want to write a loop which will iterate one by one, right? So now maybe we require one counter variable also. V underscore counter. So initially we'll assign with 0. Okay. Now what we require, loop, end loop. Okay. What is exit condition? Whenever exit when V underscore counter is greater than V underscore length, right?
Yes.
So we have to come out of the loop when it prints all character, right? And now what is the thing here? So we also need to write V underscore counter is equal to V underscore counter plus 1. And we have to print one by one character, right? So what I can write, V underscore temp underscore name is equal to, can you tell me now syntax? Substr V underscore name, right? And now what we want to do, we want to change the position, right? So initially let me assign this one to 0. Okay. So it will start with 1 now, right? It will start with 1. Every time the counter changes to 1 to 15, right? 1, 2, 3, 4 like that. And then always I want to print only one character, isn't it? So V underscore temp name will always have only one character, isn't it?
Yes.
My character. Okay. V underscore temp underscore name. Got it? So now, like, how do you know how many variables have to declare? It all depends upon your logic, how you want to achieve. Okay. So you may have a lesser number of variables also. It all depends upon the way you want to write. It all depends upon the coding, how you want to write. Okay. First of all, initially don't try to reduce the variables. Have how many variables you want. Later on, like once you get expertise, you'll know that, like where we can reduce the coding also. Okay. But are you understanding what are the things which I declared here? What are the values I'm assigning here? Why this data type or why this value like that? Or any
Yes,
questions?
sir.
Clear?
No.
Okay. Let us try to compile. Click on view dbms output. So let's see how it works or whether it will work or not. Okay. Okay, good. We got some issue because of this in dbms. The name is wrong. Okay. Let's try again. Yep. Got it.
Yes.
So it is printing Oracle Okay, after that space, then after that ERP, again it went here, right? It is printing the empty also, empty string. The reason is here we have mentioned greater than, right? So what happens is once it reaches the P, again it is going, right? Because V counter is not reaching greater than. It has to be equal to. Let us say, like it should be, whether it reaches greater than or equal to, it has to be out, right?
Hmm.
Or else let me, I'll tell you. Take very simple 5-letter word, okay? Then you'll understand. Let us say 3-letter word, very simple. ERP is there. So how many times our loop should be executed?
3 times.
3 times, right?
4.
It should be only 3, right? Because we have only 3 characters.
Yeah.
No, loop may execute 4 times, but general ideal scenario, what we want to is, it has to iterate only then based on the number of characters which are available in our string, correct? So
Yes.
now in our case, it is printing 4 times, as you said. Why? Because of what?
Greater than.
Because of the greater than symbol. So if I change it to equal to, greater than equal to, will it work?
Hmm.
Let's try. Got it?
Good.
It is executing only 3 times.
Yeah.
Okay, understood?
Hmm. Yes.
Yeah, so this is how we can use the basic loop. So instead of this particular one, maybe you can consider any logic. Okay.
Hmm.
Yep. So let's start with other one. So next is while loop. So now in the while loop, same thing again. For every loop, you'll have a loop and end loop. Okay. For everything, for every loop, you'll have a loop and end loop. But what is the basic difference is the entry condition as well as exit condition is different. Now in the basic loop, if you consider, is there any entry condition to enter into the loop? Is there any entry condition?
Yeah.
There is no entry condition at all. You can simply enter the loop, but you have an exit condition. But coming to the while loop, you cannot enter the loop until the condition is satisfied. This is an entry condition loop, right? You until unless the entry condition is satisfied, you cannot enter into the loop,
Yeah.
right? So if you see the same example, but in the while loop scenario. So here we have written while we counter greater than less than 6. So whenever the value is satisfied, then only it will enter the loop. If it doesn't satisfy, simply it will come out of the loop. Got it?
Yeah.
So declare the keyword, right? Declare the number and begin section, end section, and then while we counter less than 6, perform the looping, increment the value, and then end. Let us say if I don't increment, what will happen? Let us say assume that I forgot to increment. There could be some bug which I forgot to mention. So let's say that I forgot to increment. What will happen if you don't increment?
It repeats infinitely.
Yep, it'll become an infinite loop, right? Infinite.
Yeah.
So it will just go on infinitely, and we have to stop the server or maybe stop the machine. That's what happens.
Yeah.
So that's why we have to be very careful whenever you're working the loops. Always make sure that you have the entry condition or the appropriate exit conditions.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's write one more example in the while loop scenario. Do you have anything in idea? Any idea?
Mm.
Let's implement something. Any idea if you have? While loop. Okay. So as usual, declare, begin, and end. Okay.
Mm.
Let's try to implement the same thing in the while loop. Okay. I'll consider the same thing in the while loop. Okay. Now here, what will be the difference here? The same example, but we are implementing the while loop scenario. So what we have to do? So instead of writing the exit condition, I'll just comment here. What I will write here? While v underscore counter, okay, v underscore counter is less than v underscore length, right?
Yes.
So here it is quite different. If you observe, there we mention v underscore counter is greater than or equal to length, get exit. But here it is entry, right? It is entry. So if it is less than, then get an enter into the loop.
Yeah.
Got it?
Yes.
Same thing. We have got the same result, right?
Yes.
So I'll say Workday. Workday is one of the famous cloud ERP. Got it?
Yeah.
So this is how we can use a while loop. The basic thing is you have to understand why I mentioned less than here, and there why we mentioned greater than symbol here there. Okay.
Yes.
Now next thing, very much important loop, for loop, and this is very much preferred by developers also, because it provides lot number of functionalities for a developer. So if you observe here, the syntax of for loop is the blue color highlighted are keywords for loop and end loop, and followed by here we have something called counter. So for loop, what we have to do is we have to mention the counter also. For counter, okay, this can be user defined variable or it can be a for loop automatically declares a variable. We can consider that. For counter in lower bound to upper bound, or you can mention the reverse way also. It can go to from 1 to 5 or it can go from 5 to 1. Okay. And then you can inside this you can write it. And the one more thing is in the for loop, this counter will be incremented automatically by 1 every time. You cannot change that behavior. Okay. This counter is declared implicitly and we does not need to declare explicitly, and also this will be incremented by 1 automatically. Okay. And now can you see this example? If you observe here, there is no need to declare, there is no declared section at all here if you consider in this example, because
Yes.
that v underscore counter will be declared automatically by the for loop, so it does not need to bother, right?
Yes.
And it will be incremented by 1 automatically, and also it is having the condition here itself. Is it an entry condition or exit condition? Is it entry or exit?
Okay.
Entry, right?
Yes.
It is entry condition 1, because we are checking the condition while entering to the loop. That is why it's called entry condition. Okay. So let's write the same example using for loop. The same example I prefer. So we'll try to write the same this one in the for loop scenario. So now what I can do here. So here instead of this one, what we have to mention. Let me comment. Okay. For one more thing is we does not need to do this incremental at all. Okay.
Yes.
So simply we can mention for v underscore counter in 1 dot, like this we have to mention. So what is the length? V underscore length, like this. For v underscore counter in 1, 2 dots, and then v length. Got it?
Yes.
And there is no exit condition, and there is no need to increment, right? And there is no less than or greater than conditions at all. It automatically verifies. If it reaches v underscore length, simply it will come out with a loop. Okay?
No need of
Yeah, there is no need of declaration of this variable also. Now instead of v, I can just comment this one also simply.
Yes.
There is no need to declare at all. So yeah, here we are using it, but still we does not need to declare at all. Got it?
Yeah.
Right? So this is a preferred one. This is very easy actually, if you observe the syntax carefully.
Yes.
So it is incrementing automatically and it will exit automatically. There is no entry condition. I mean, of course, entry is there. There is no, like, we does not need to bother about increment. And if you try to increment also, it will give an error. Let us say, sometimes, you want to skip the variables. So you don't want to iterate when the condition is so and so, or if you want to increment the counter by some particular value, see here, it will give an error if you try to change the value. Can you see? We cannot change the value of a for loop counter. Cannot be used as an assignment operator.
Yeah.
Whatever the counter variable which you are using in the for loop, you can use it for printing purpose or you can use it for the value purpose, but you cannot change the value of the counter variable of a for loop. Got it?
Yes.
Good. So this all about the loops, and now which one I want to discuss? Yep. I would like to discuss about cursors, okay? We'll discuss about cursors, then we'll get into other data types, composite or some other thing, okay? So any questions before I proceed?
No, sir.
Okay. So what do you mean by cursor? Any idea?
Which stores, it's a placeholder which stores the value of the SQL statement.
Yep. Okay.
Okay.
So cursor can store a single record or multiple records.
Multiple records.
It can be, right? It can be 0 to n. There is no limit on that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good. So now here PLSQL cursor. Cursor points to the current row in the present table. It also provides additional information. It's all non, okay, some information. But let us get into cursors. So how many types of cursors are there? In the PLSQL, there are two types. Okay, there is one more type also, but we'll discuss that later. That is called ref cursor. But initially, consider there are two types of cursor. One is called implicit cursor, and other one is explicit cursor. Okay, implicit and explicit. So implicit cursor is used, like here, whenever you want to fetch only one particular row. Let us say you want to get the exchange rate for a given date. So we prefer to use implicit. Or let us say you want to get the employee name for a given employee ID. When you're sure that if you want to have only one record, then we go for implicit. But sometimes, if you want to iterate for some certain set of data, then we have to go for explicit. Okay. And there is one more difference between the implicit and explicit. So in the implicit, there is no need to prior declaration of a cursor. In the explicit, we have to declare it, we have to open it, we have to perform fetch operation, and we have to close it also. This is opposite to the implicit. Okay, we'll see the example, then you can easily understand. Okay. So some more theory about the implicit cursor. It extracts a row of a data from database by using select statement. Okay, and what is the other thing? Determine DML outcome with implicit cursor attributes. Okay, leave about that. This is syntax. This is syntax of a implicit cursor. Select our Oracle SQL keyword, followed by select list, how many columns you want to retrieve, into clause, nothing but it all depends upon how many variables how many columns you mention the select list, that number of variables you have to mention. Okay, let us say in the select list you mention 3 columns, so in the into also you have to mention 3 columns. If it's a record data type, you can mention only one record data type. But let us say if you are mentioning independent stuff, independent columns, then you have to mention that number of independent columns. And from table and where condition. See, why do we use cursors in the PLSQL? What is the need? See, PLSQL, when you write a PLSQL program, we know that it's a programming flavor of a SQL, right? Procedural language. It's a procedural language of a SQL. So procedural language will have a set of, a programming language flavor like loops, iterations, keywords, right? It will have those things. But like when you write a business logic, it all depends upon the data, right? What is like when you, let us say you want to implement some business functionality. On what basis you implement a functionality? You require some test data, right? You require some transaction information. Let us say whenever the employee, let us assume that wherever the job type an employee belongs to IT, you want to give commission of 10%. Let us say if a person of job type equal to marketing, you want to give 25% commission for them. So then you require some particular data from the database table, and then you want to implement your business functionality. So whenever you want to access any database data in the PLSQL, you have to use cursor. Cursor is the only thing which is available to get the data from database, which we can use in the PLSQL. Okay, so I can say that the cursor is a function. I mean, using cursors only we can get the data from database in the PLSQL environment. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah. So observe this example here. What I'm doing here. Would like to get the department name for a given department ID. So now I'm writing a PLSQL program, right? PLSQL, no, only PLSQL. It's just not PL, okay? It's a procedural language with SQL flavor also. Because procedural language without having SQL flavor is not at all a use, right? Because this programming language specially for the database purpose, isn't it? So that is why it is capable enough to read the SQL statements. That's the reason. So here what are we doing? We want to get the department name for a given department ID. So we know that like if it is a normal SQL statement, we know that like we can just mention select department name from and like that. But if we want to use the same select statement inside the PLSQL, what is the difference you observe? What is the difference you observe? We have a separate into clause. That's the only difference. Remaining thing is same, right? Remaining is same. Only thing difference we observe is we have declared a temporary variable called v underscore department, and we are fetching the value into this variable using into clause. Why are we using into clause here? Because see, generally when a PL/SQL engine executes a SQL statement, where it will print? It has to print somewhere, right?
Yeah.
So now this particular v underscore department is a variable which will hold that value. That is why we mention into clause here. So let me write example, then we'll get an idea. So now the thing is, let us say we want to write a SQL query, which will get the data, which will get the employee name of a given employee ID. Okay. So what is the syntax first of all? Now let us say I will pass this employee number 7839. So where employee number is equal to 7839. I want to fetch only e-name. So how can I write? Like this I can write, isn't it?
Yeah.
This is how I can write it. Now where is it printing the output? This statement is giving one record and one column, right? It is giving only one record with one column. Now where is it printing the output? In this particular query result area, right? This temporary place where it is printing the result of a SQL query. Now our requirement is to write a PLSQL program, okay? To write a PLSQL program which will fetch the employee name for a given employee ID. So we know that like if you want to get the data from database, only select query is only possibility or available functionality which we can use. There is no other means. There is no other way. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. Let's try that. So now implicit cursor example. Okay, this is implicit. Why it is called implicit also I'll tell you. Give me some time. Now always declare begin and end. Now what we want to do, we want to consider employee ID as an input, v underscore emp number as input, and we want to fetch employee name, v underscore emp name as employee name. Can I declare like this, emp dot ename percentile type?
Yeah.
Right? Now what we want to do, I'll be using same query here. There is no difference. Observe here. I'll just use the same query. I'll use the same query. So what is the difference is employee number I want to pass it runtime. So I should not hard code, right? This is called hard coding. When you're assigning some values already, that's called hard coding. But we want to pass the value at runtime. While executing, you want to pass a different value for this one, right?
Yeah.
So that's why I mentioned emp number is called v underscore emp number. But now if you execute, where it will print the value? It has to have a placeholder, right? That's the reason we have to mention into v underscore emp name. That's it. Got it? Only thing we are doing is same SQL query. Only thing is we are adding up the into clause. When you want to use a SQL query in the PL/SQL, we have to use into clause for that. This is called implicit cursor. This is called implicit cursor. Okay. Now let us say I'll assign value here 7839, 7839, and now let's print the employee name. DBMS underscore output dot put underscore line employee name. Okay. Any doubts?
No.
So execute this one, and can you see emp name?
Yeah.
Now here I declared the variable with uppercase, but while printing it, I mention it as lowercase, but still it is not giving error, right?
Yes.
So uppercase, lowercase, it doesn't bother. It case insensitive. Okay, but it is not the case with the Java or C language.
Yeah.
They are strict
Sir, I
type
have
lang.
a doubt.
Sorry.
I have a doubt.
Sure, sure.
Sir, for explicit cursor, we mentioned the name like cursor C.
Yeah.
Now here, what is the cursor name in implicit?
Okay. Okay. Good. See, when you say implicit cursor, the basic thing is implicit cursor does not have a name. It does not have a name. Okay. It is executed by PLSQL engine. So implicit, that is why implicit cursor does not require any prior declaration. There is no prior declaration. No prior declaration. It is automatically fetched. It is automatically executed. It is automatically closed.
Okay.
Right?
Yes.
Right. Now, same example I will write in explicit cursor. Okay. Then you will get some idea. Same example I'll write in explicit. Of course, we have not discussed, but let us write that. Okay. So when you say explicit, what we can do? We can just take this query here. We can cut it. I'll remove this one. So cursor c underscore emp data is, you can mention the query, right? And we have to remove the into clause. We should not mention into clause here, right? We should not mention into clause here. And also now we want to pass the dynamic parameter, right? We want to pass the employee number at runtime. So now what we have to do here, we have to mention it as a parameter. Then only it will work. We have to mention like this, c underscore emp number like this. This is called cursor parameter. Okay. So we are passing the employee number here. We already have employee number. Why? What is the reason of mentioning like this? Because see, generally in the cursor, if it is having a parameter, we have to pass like this only. We'll consider other scenarios also, but initially please consider this way. Okay. Now we have to perform the open operation. Explicitly we have to open it. Open c underscore emp data like this, and we have to pass the emp number like this. Okay. And we have to perform fetch operation c underscore emp data into where v underscore emp name, and we have to mention close also. Fetch, open, fetch, and close. Got it? Now tell me your doubt here.
So what is c underscore emp number and v underscore emp?
Yeah. See, the thing is, now while declaring a cursor, okay, while declaring a cursor, we are aware that this select query requires one parameter, right? This requires one parameter. Now, so here, like when you're passing, when you want to pass some particular variable name, like if you want to pass some particular variable value to the cursor at runtime, first thing is it has to know what is the parameter you want to pass, what is the data type, as well as what is the variable name. So what we declare is, we declared that there is a variable called c underscore emp number, which is of data type number. Okay, that is a value we are expecting at runtime for the cursor. Now what is this emp number? This emp number is something which is outside of the cursor. So we are assigning a value for v underscore emp number, and we are passing that v underscore emp number to the cursor. So what will happen is, at runtime, the c underscore emp number is equal to v underscore emp number at runtime. This is only cursor variable. You cannot access this outside. This is only available to the cursor itself. It is not available outside. Okay. So let's execute this one. We got the value, right? King. Correct. Now let's try here whether we already have a variable. Why can't we use this existing one? Let me try. Okay. Now I'll just comment this one. Can we try like this? Okay. Try this one. Can you see now what it is telling? So it could not identify, right? And one more thing is, here we can remove this one also. So it is not printing anything if you see here. Right? So it is not finding out what is the employee number we mentioned there. Sorry, this one, right? EMP number. Got it? Okay, let me redesign, okay? Maybe if it is confusion. Leave over the parameter right now, okay? Because that is a different concept I can tell you later in the next what is the next example. But time being, now what I have done here is, if you observe here, v underscore emp number we declared, right? And cursor, what I mentioned, select e name from emp where emp number is equal to v underscore emp number, right? The same emp number. Okay. And now we are declaring a value for this one, and perform open operation, fetch operation, and close operation. Now, if you compare the syntax, if you compare the implicit cursor and explicit cursor, we are getting the same result. But what are we doing here? We are explicitly performing open, fetch, and close, isn't it? Got it? That's the difference. So in the implicit cursor, we does not need to bother about open, fetch, and close. But in the explicit, we have to explicitly open, we have to explicitly fetch and close. That's the difference. Right? Now, see one more example. See one more thing here. Let us say I'll pass some junk data. I mean to say some employee number which is not there in my database. Try to execute now. See what will happen here. Now what happened here? It is printing null. It is not printing any data, right? There is no employee number with 0. Now try the same thing with implicit and see what will happen. Here also I'll pass 0. Now see what will happen. Can you see? No data found. Why? So when you're using an implicit cursor, as per the PLSQL logic, when you're using implicit cursor, it always has to fetch one row. If it doesn't fetch any row, then it will give an exception. Now it is giving exception. The exception number is this one, or a 1403. And it is saying no data found. No data found means the SQL query got executed and it could not return any data. That is what no data found means. Okay. So the problem with implicit is, if your query does not return any data, simply it will give an exception. But in the explicit cursor, it doesn't bother. Like if it is having data, it will show to you. If it doesn't have data, that's it. It will not give any error at all. Okay. Now we can handle the exception here. We can handle the exception. See, when you say handling the exception, it doesn't mean you're solving the problem. It is just you're just trapping the exception, and you're gracefully mentioning to the user, boss, you got an exception. This is the reason. That's what it means, isn't it? In the programming language, handling exception doesn't mean solving the exception. It is just handling the exception only. Now, what I can do, let us say, now what is happening is, it is just stopping suddenly, right? I'm not like it's just getting stopped suddenly. If you're not a technical developer, and let us say you're a functional consultant, and you got this output, and you just worry, right? Okay, what is this 043? What is the no data found? All these things, right? They may not understand all these things, isn't it? So then what we have to do is, as a developer, we have to write an exception block. Exception block was not mandatory, but generally we have to have an exception block. Now, rather than getting into error, what I can do is, observe here. I'll just write one line of statement when others than, okay, dbms underscore output dot put underscore line, okay, you got into exception, okay, and I'll mention the error number also, okay, dbms underscore output dot put underscore line, SQL code, which will give the error code, and the other one is SQL ERRM. This is error message. Now see the difference. It will get into error, but like what will happen is it will clearly mention in this information for us. It has to. Can you see? You got into exception, and can you see here? It clearly tells that it got completed. It is not giving. It is not just. It's not saying that it got stopped, right? It clearly says that what is the exception and got it. So this is what we are doing here now. Okay. So the basic thing is, when you're using implicit cursor, whatever the query which you write or whatever the data you pass, always you have to get one particular row or a column. If you don't get, you will get into exception. But of course, we always prefer to use implicit, because in the explicit, the problem is we have to declare explicitly, we have to perform open operation, but we have to perform fetch operation also, isn't it? Correct?
Yes, sir.
And the problem with I mean, other thing is, using implicit, you can fetch only one row. You cannot fetch multiple rows. Okay. So let me show you one more example in the implicit. Okay. implicit cursor, declare begin and end. Okay, I'll just say v underscore emp row employee percentile row type. Now I'm getting the data row type. Now what I want to do is I want to get all the data of an employee based on the emp number what they pass. So what I can do, select star, okay, into v underscore emp underscore row from emp where emp nvo is equal to v underscore emp nvo. Got it? Now I'll print the value like this, dbms underscore output underscore line emp name v underscore emp underscore row dot ename, like this I have to write. Okay, salary and high date, or maybe department nvo. Got it? Do you see any issue here? Will this get executed, or do you see any compilation issue or runtime issue? You know, do you know the difference? Sorry, yeah.
It's an implicit cursor, no, sir. It can't
Yes.
multiple rows.
Yes, it is implicit cursor, but how can we are not getting multiple rows, right? I'm mentioning the employee number, isn't it? It will get only one row, isn't it? One row can have any number of columns, isn't it? Don't get confused between the rows and columns. Let me tell you here. See now, sorry, emp where emp no is equal to 7839. How many records we got?
Single row.
How many records? How many records we got?
One.
Understood? We got one record. One record is one. Row or record both are same, isn't it? When you say row or record is both are same. But how many columns we got? 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Right? 8 columns. Now, the second sample, what I'm doing here, how many columns I'll get? I'll get 8 columns, but how many rows? Only one row, isn't it? It has to fetch only one row. Because I'm passing employee number, right? Employee number is unique.
Yes.
If the employee number is not unique, then of course that's a different story. But assume that employee number is unique in the database table. So how many records we may expect?
One
single row. So here, observe here, this implicit cursor can return, I mentioned star, right? I mentioned star. Nothing but this particular into clause, this variable should hold all the columns. Nothing but 8 columns it has to hold. That is why declared it has a row type. Row type means it's a variable of employee record data type. So nothing but it can hold 8 columns. And if you want to fetch the column value, we have to mention the row name dot column value. This is how we have to mention. Right?
Yes.
So from where I'm getting e-name or e-salary or department number, there is nowhere I mentioned, right? For EMP row, how is it getting e-name? The thing is, this is equivalent to row type of EMP table, right? So what happens is when you're fetching the data, whatever the columns which are there, EMP row also will have EMP row is v underscore EMP row is a variable which can hold employee record data type. So it will have 8 columns. So when you're fetching it, it will map column to column and it will assign the values accordingly. Okay. Now tell me whether it will give an error compilation issue or runtime issue. Compile time issue or runtime issue. What is the difference? So compile time issue generally occurs because of syntax, isn't it?
Yes.
And what is the runtime? It occurs because of what?
Data.
It can be logic mistake or data mistake or like maybe some unexpected exception or unexpected exceptions. Got it? That's the difference. Compile time means which occurs specifically mainly because of the syntax issue. Now here, if you observe, let us say I'll remove this declare keyword and I'll just assume there is a mistake in the declare keyword. Now if you try to compile, what it will do? It will give compilation issue, right? It has to give compilation issue. So it says some like it is because of the first mistake. It is it is giving all other things as a mistake.
Yeah.
Right? Now let us say if I declare keyword properly and see what will be the issue. It may give into another issue also now. Now it is giving another issue. What it is giving? No data found. Why? Are you passing the employee number first of all?
Yeah.
If
Yes.
you don't pass employee number, what will happen to the employee number? It will be null, right?
Yeah.
If you see here, let us say I'll print the initial value dbms underscore output dot put underscore line initial value of emp number. Okay. Now try to print it. Now what is the initial value here? Which is empty here or nothing but null. Correct. So if you're passing null to the SQL query, what it can do? Or else you can try here. See, I'll take the same query. I'll take the same query here. Okay. Now what I will do, I'll just pass null like this. Will it give data? No, right?
Yeah.
Sorry, I can remove this. You have to remove this, right? Into should not be there here.
Yes.
No data. That is what no data found means, right? Okay. Now to solve this issue, what I have to do? I have to assign a value here. V underscore emp number is equal to 7839. Now try it again. Got it?
Yeah.
So initial value is empty, and after that we have assigned a value, then see the difference also. Let us say got it.
Yeah.
So after assigning the value, it got changed to 7839, and we got the value, the total information about the employee name, salary, department number, other things.
Yeah.
Got it?
Yes.
Now, okay. Assume that like while writing the query as a developer, we generally do mistakes, right? I assume that I forgot to mention the where clause. Now what will happen? Will it work?
No, we are not possible.
Yes, I'm not passing. Because of not passing, what is the reason? Because of not passing the value, why will it not work? Do we get exception?
Okay.
Do we get into exception or what? Or will it, my question is, will it give a compilation issue or runtime issue?
Runtime.
Yeah, perfect. It will give a runtime issue because of what reason? We are not passing the employee number,
We
that
are
is
not.
first. But even though if you don't pass, that could not be the issue, right? That should not be an issue. It is my wish to pass the data or not. But the problem is we are using implicit cursor. So if you don't pass the employee number, what will happen? This employee number will fetch all the 16 records, right? All the 15 records which are available in the EMP table. So when you're using implicit cursor, you should fetch only one record. We cannot fetch more than one record.
Yes.
Correct? So now see here.
Yeah.
See what will happen. What is the runtime issue it will get? Exact fetch returns more than one record. Can you see?
Yes.
Exact fetch returns more than number of rows. This is the issue now. It is a different issue. 01422. Initially we got 01403 or something.
Yeah.
Got it?
Yes.
And also if you observe, till this line number 9 it was good. If you see here, till this line number 9 it executed properly. After line number 9 only it got into issue.
Yes.
And mostly it generally tells the error line number also if you observe carefully. Can you see line number 11 also, it is clearly mentioning where it got into issue also. Line number 11. Okay, this is how we have to debug. We have to find till what point it executed and from where it got into error. That's how we can easily debug. Because let us say if your code is of around 500 lines, how do you know which particular bug? Compilation issue anyway, during compilation only will get it. How about runtime? That's where the bigger problem is, right?
Yeah.
So this is how we have to trace it, like okay, is it giving any line number, or if it's giving any output, till what point it executed. So based on that, we can trace it. Okay, This is a line number we are getting, so it means that there is some bug at that line number. That's how we have to trace. Clear?
Yes.
Now what is the solution for this one? Basic thing is always pass the employee number. Correct?
Yes.
Okay. So this is all about the implicit. Bus, shall we stop?
Yeah.
So we'll continue cursors again. Okay, it's not yet done. We have many things to to discuss about cursors. It's very much important topic. Okay, when you go for a PLSQL interview, this is a basic question they will ask. Okay.
Mm.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Bye.